Profound story from Greg Valentine's Memoir. Now, on the surface, this sounds like a pretty fun anecdote about, borrowing a supercar and experiencing some extreme luxury. But as we dig into this narrative, we're going to see it actually delivers this ultimate gut punch of a lesson about time, mortality, and the absolute illusion of permanence. So, let's dive right into this premise. The whole thing kicks off with a taste of incredible wealth, but it ends up completely flipping the script on what ownership even means. Valentine literally writes, "At the time, I thought this was a story about a car. It wasn't. It was actually about how easily life just opens and closes and how incredibly brief our invitations into certain moments really are." But to really get this, we first need to rethink what a car actually is.
The text here asks us to stop looking at cars as just machines. Instead, think of them as these intimate containers for our lived experiences. Valentine calls them moving rooms, which is just a brilliant way to put it. They're these little spaces where conversations unfold, where a silence can suddenly become super comfortable or incredibly heavy. It's where music literally marks the chapters of your life. Think about it. We remember where we were going, who was sitting right next to us, the weather outside, and that steady hum of the engine beneath it all. Cars hold memory in a way that very few other objects do.
Okay, so picture this. It's the late 1990s. Greg Valentine is performing with his band, Alpha Connection, at this charity event in Lancashire. The host for the evening, a guy named John Ashworth. Now, John was a very wealthy property developer, but more importantly, he was a guy who was just totally at ease with his generosity. He wasn't showy about it at all. He just liked people. He loved a good story, and he genuinely enjoyed watching happiness ripple out from these small acts. And, well, John also had a pretty remarkable collection of vehicles.
We're talking Bentleys, Mercedes convertibles, and right in the middle of it all, an Aston Martin DB7. A silver soft-top, black leather interior, white trim. Just understated, elegant, quietly confident. Basically exactly what an Aston Martin is supposed to be. Well, during this charity evening, they held a raffle. Tickets were literally just a few pounds. John encourages Greg to buy one, and no kidding, Greg actually wins first prize. But here's the kicker. The prize wasn't ownership of the car. It was way better than that. It was a week's use of any car you wanted. John just insured the Aston Martin, no fuss, tossed Greg the keys, and said he could drive it up to 1,000 miles. No crazy conditions, no warnings, just complete trust.
And this whole experience just perfectly captures the pure joy of borrowing. Greg takes this incredible machine from Lancashire all the way down to Portsmouth, where he and his wife Phaedra were living at the time. Actually, he shares this hilarious moment where he's at a service station near Birmingham, and a police Range Rover pulls in and parks directly behind him. Two officers get out, and you can imagine his stomach completely drops. But they weren't there to question him at all. They literally just wanted to look at the car. They smiled, asked a few questions, and wished him a good trip. For that whole week, this Aston Martin became part of his normal, ordinary life. He drove Phaedra out to dinner, visited family, parked it right outside their terraced house, just quietly laughing at how totally out of place it looked. He knew it wouldn't last, but as he points out, it wasn't possession, it was experience. Fast forward about a year, and Greg casually asks if he can borrow the keys again. His nephew, Ian, was getting married up in Scotland, and Greg thought, hey, arriving in a silver Aston Martin convertible, wearing a kilt, with the best men grinning in the back, that would be absolutely unforgettable. And John? He didn't even hesitate. Greg and Phaedra drove north, taking in the long roads, the open skies, and that low, confident engine note just carrying them steadily toward the Highlands. It felt almost ceremonial. The trip was absolutely flawless, though Ian did admit years later that he spent the entire drive absolutely terrified that the pin in his wedding kilt was going to scratch that luxury leather. It's such a funny, tiny human concern. Just a perfect, joyful weekend. After that brilliant weekend in Scotland, the car went back, and life just went back to its normal rhythm, the usual routine. But then, not too long after that, Greg's phone rings. It was John. John was originally just calling to ask if Greg's band would come back and play at the next charity event in May. But then he said something that just stopped the conversation cold. He said he didn't think he'd be there. John had just been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and despite having these regular, top-tier private health checks, the cancer had been completely missed. The doctors gave him weeks, not months, weeks. The sheer terrifying suddenness of it just stopped everything in its tracks. Greg remembers just sitting there in total silence after he hung up, hit by this incredibly heavy realization. I mean, here was John, a guy who had absolutely everything society tells us is important. Huge success, massive properties, a literal fleet of supercars. And yet, all of that wealth was completely powerless. Not a single pound of that massive fortune could buy him even one extra second of time.
And there is this one specific memory of John that kept popping up for Greg, which perfectly captures the limits of money. John had once wanted to buy his wife a brand new Jaguar for her birthday, like the ultimate status symbol, right? But she didn't want it. Instead, she'd found this secondhand Mini on eBay, and she liked that one way more. It's a brilliant reminder that genuine value is rarely, if ever, actually tied to a price tag.
That little story about the Mini really does say more than any complex philosophy ever could. It perfectly sums up the tragic irony of John's situation, and it forced Greg to completely rethink what that Aston Martin experience really meant. When John passed away, Greg realized the car wasn't just this vessel for joy and beauty. It was actually carrying a massive life lesson. It showed him, in real time, exactly how fleeting our grasp on the world really is.
Which brings us to this really fascinating theme that emerged from all this, the concept of borrowing. The big insight here is that everything we fight so hard to own in this life, it's actually just rented. Greg didn't own the Aston Martin. It was just passing through his hands. But it goes way deeper than cars. The idea here is that physical objects, our big achievements, our impressive job titles, and yes, even our youth, we don't actually own any of it. They are strictly temporary. Think about how society constantly pushes what we could call the resume view of life. It's this obsession with straight lines, hitting predictable milestones, and racking up permanent possessions and fixed identities. We desperately want things to be permanent. But actual reality? It's completely different. Real life is this beautifully messy, rented reality made up of circular loops, temporary states, and borrowed experiences. We don't just arrive at some final version of ourselves and lock it in forever, we continuously practice it.
So try thinking of those temporary possessions and titles as scaffolding. You know, the cars you drive, the jobs you do, or the daily routines you rely on, they aren't actually who you are. They are just temporary structures. They hold you safely in place while you go about the incredibly messy business of becoming someone else. They're there to support your growth. And when a phase of your life ends, that scaffolding naturally falls away. You don't need to mourn it because it did its job. It's kind of like a sunset reflecting across the water, touching the distant shores one last time before it fades out. It mirrors this really profound truth at the heart of Greg's story. Time isn't something we lose, it's something we temporarily pass through. Like a boat lifted from the water, carried for a moment, and then gently set right back down.
So when that scaffolding falls away, and when the illusion of permanence finally breaks, what actually remains? Well, Valentine distills it down to 4 core things. Experiences matter, people matter, health matters, and time matters. Absolutely everything else simply passes through our hands for a brief moment and then moves on, just like that beautiful silver Aston Martin. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought today, and I really want you to use it to challenge how you view the structures in your own life right now. Take a look at your job title, your daily routines, the stuff you insure, the labels you use to describe yourself at parties. If absolutely everything is just borrowed, what do you actually get to keep? What are you deliberately choosing to carry forward as you continue your own active becoming? Chew on that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the scaffolding in your own life.